So I've thought about some things that weren't discussed in the film, but may be of interest in terms of technical structural details. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer.
Yes.
First.
Yeah. These kinds of talks and presentations have been going on for years. And some radio stations have done stuff here and there. However, I have never ever heard anybody has ever gone to the building trades union. Obviously, if there was work done, legal or illegal, in those buildings, there would be some kind of record. And I'm from the building trades, and Gotti was controlling the towers. He would know, has anybody ever gone to Gotti? He would know who was going in and who was going out.
Well, we have a number of leads in that area with architects and engineers working with the Lawyers Committee, a group of professional lawyers that has submitted a petition that George mentioned to the grand jury this October, which specifically states we're looking for the use of explosives on 9/11. You need to investigate that. Along with that, now we have many more FOIA suits coming and other lawsuits coming that will address the different people that we're looking at. Basically, we're doing our own kind of legalistic analysis to go after those kind of people you were talking about.
You're going to the building. Can't you go directly to the building trades? Now, they may have a lot to lose.
Exactly. So we are filing lawsuits, in other words, where we have to go at them, and we're also trying indirectly, not directly, but through closed, closed methods that are not so public, to try to get people to come forward. And there are a number of people that may be coming forward to give testimony in various platforms, whether legal testimony or other types of testimony, that are those type of people you're talking about.
Yeah,
there's a lot of them.
There are thousands of members of the building trades unions in this city, and they live not just in the city, they live in all the adjoining states. You have a massive wealth. I'm sure if somebody approached these people, you would get some information.
Yes, we're trying to target, because there is a lot of specific information about time frames and different trades that might have been involved in those time frames, and companies that are on the books that had security clearances during those time frames. So yes, we're targeting specifically, but that information is being kind of kept under wraps.
Unrelated, I know somebody who met somebody at a meeting, not here in the city, in another state, who claimed that he and a friend of his were setting charges in the towers.
Yeah, there are many different types of claims like that. So we are going to be looking into that. Nothing we can come forward with for various obvious reasons right now, but we are looking in that direction. You're next.
Yeah, well, what about that story, and I never can get it straight. It's never out in the media, but you hear whispers about it. People in California were helping the 9/11 pilots, and they were giving aid and comfort to them for years.
Yeah, that's related to the 28 pages and JASTA lawsuits that are now happening down at the court house downtown. And yes, there are, it's pretty black and white in this testimony and in the documents that were withheld from Congress.
Yeah.
That yes, there were prominent Saudis and families that were supporting, and FBI, people that were supporting the terrorists in San Diego specifically, and in Florida sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know if you can answer this. I'm interested in the nanothermite question. Is that something I can go into a store and buy? Is it a controlled substance? Is there any way of documenting who had access to that? It seems to be a pretty rare commodity.
Well, you can actually make your own thermite, and you can go on YouTube.
But the nanothermite?
The nanothermite, no, because that requires special processing. Also, they hadn't mentioned it here, but not only was it nanothermite, but the application method was a way that has never been seen before by these scientists. So it was a very high-tech thermitic type of device that they do not know if it exists.
So who would have access to that, though?
Well, that would be your Defense Department, high-level military.
Military, Mossad, places like that?
Yeah, covert operations. Anybody that wants to demolish buildings, for whatever, even demolitions expert people may, but Again, this is, you don't, if you're doing a classic demolition that's legally approved, you wouldn't need to use those expensive type of materials. You could just use standard demolition materials, much more effectively, less expensive. However, in the military, they're trying to hide their footsteps, and they want to use it in a variety of other covert ways. They're going to develop something special. So.
Has there been an explanation why the things were sent to China within 2 weeks?
That has not been explained.
Is it just greed? I mean, is it just...
You could say just greed, and hey, if we can take down buildings with office fires, why don't we just do it that way instead of spending it on explosives? I think you're next and back to the guy.
I'm pretty sure that they've kept some. I reckon the Chinese had a shed and they've kept some of it because they knew exactly what happened and the Russians knew exactly what occurred. But the thing I wanted to say, so I try to keep an open mind. I have seen that film years ago, and the thing that I get now, it didn't collapse, they exploded. The two towers went like that. And if actually, now I listen to George and I try to keep an open mind because you can really get caught up in whatever. I understand some say that the bolts did melt and you did get some collapsing, but they exploded. They went, like, they just went, and they left this blast, like they've been blasted. And I'm just thinking, how much explosive were used? It would have filled this room. It was a one hell of a job. I mean, they overdid it. The team that was in charge overdid the job, I think. They blew it to smithereens.
Well, I can speak to that in 2 points. It's because these buildings were so super strong. I mean, there's this kind of misconception going around that, they had to make this sufficient floor space, so they got rid of all the steel, they put the steel on the skin on the outside, and there was nothing really on the inside. Well, that skin was a very, very strong skin. And the interior core was a very, very strong interior core. In fact, the economy of space gave way to the cost of the steel. They actually had to use more tonnage of much higher strength steel than in any other building in history has ever been used. So they actually had to use more steel of a higher strength than in any other buildings in the planet today. And therefore, you better be careful you use up plenty of explosives there. Because
the building had like a trunk. It was like a cement tube, like you said, George, but it had a trunk in the middle.
Yeah, very serious trunk. And I'll make another important point that hasn't been said yet in a lot of these documentaries is that the strength of the building went from low to top, much stronger at the bottom and much weaker at the top, more like a pyramid. In other words, you had 14-inch box columns all around the perimeter, 240 of them around the perimeter, that were 14 inches by 14 inches every 3 feet on center. But at the bottom, the 14-inch beam column was 3.5 inches thick on its wall. So it was a big, thick, heavy box. Now, as you go all the way to the top, it gets down to 1/4 inch. That's how much thinner it got at the top. In other words, the reason for this is the dead load and because of the wind load. That wind, you had to have a much stronger base that had to resist that overturning moment when you get the wind. Yeah. So you had a very heavy base, and it got much thinner towards the top. And that was the same going on with the core. The core columns at the bottom were 4.5 feet by 3 feet, with 3.5-inch thick steel wall at the bottom, and at the top they were mere I-beams. So the top was much weaker and much less strong than the bottom. And of course, the part that was undamaged that got fallen through was the really strong part of the building, as strong as a piece of stone, or earth coming up. It's as if that top of that building were crushing into earth, not into a weak, poorly built building. And the other big critical question about the explosives, it happened too fast. And they had to kind of, they couldn't make it look segmented. It might have been better that way. But bottom line is, if you took the top of the building, the second building, or even the first one, and you just dropped that top of that building through thin air, it would have hit the ground in 8.5 seconds through the thin air. Well, through that, and through that structure I just described, the strong part that was healthy, it only took 2 seconds longer to hit the ground. 1001, 1002. 1001, 1002. Are you telling me that's as much extra time that a steel structure below that's healthy can give resistance to hitting the ground? It was blown up. Yeah.
So I have a degree in physics, so I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. Now, I can pick that thing to pieces and show you a whole lot of things that's wrong with that film you showed us. I'm not going to do that. But if there were explosions and there were these people from Eastern Europe that flew these planes, you mean these people that flew these planes were working with the people, but all these tens of thousands of tons of explosives in those buildings, they're working together? Is that what you're saying?
That's what we're saying, and about the planes being flown by pilots really looks more like computers were flying the planes. There might have been some guys in the seat there, but they were stooges. Computers. They were drones.
There's photos of these people.
And it would, you know, various ideas about how many people it would take and what it would take to rig these buildings, but that's brings up another suspicious point.
They've identified the people flying the plane.
Well, but a lot of those people are still alive, by the way, but at least their passports may have been stolen, but those people that were in the passports, there's 7 of them that are confirmed alive.
Where'd you hear this?
Well, that's actually lawsuits that they filed against the Saudi government to say, hey, you got to take our... What's that?
BBC reported that.
Yeah, but bottom line is there were a lot of different people involved.
They got a name for it, they call it fake news.
Yeah. Right. So, and so the idea is that yes, it was a very sophisticated operation, and the point I want to make about that is that the other big thing to me, they came down too fast, forgetting everything else, what kind of explosives or whatever. They came down too fast for it to be office fires or a gravity collapse. And the other thing is, it had to be then something more sophisticated, done ahead of time, breaching security in the World Trade Center with a lot of people involved, like you said. So in other words, it wasn't Al-Qaeda.
I got one other question.
Or just 19 Muslims.
Assuming you had
Could we
all
talk
the-
about the science, which is what this film is about, not the politics, please? That's a whole other discussion. I'm interested in the
Okay, we'll
science.
talk to the science.
Assuming we had all these explosives, how come all these thousands of people working in these buildings and all these offices, none of them saw those explosives sitting next to their desks?
Because we think the work was done at night. There's various evidence that we have that most of the work was done at night.
At one night?
At night,
All
it was
one
during,
night?
it was during,
No,
during
Many
the
nights.
Many nights.
In the structure, you wouldn't have it today.
When people came in the morning, how come nobody saw those explosives sitting in their office?
Because they arrived at between 11 o'clock and then they left by 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oh.
Yeah.
They weren't okay like that.
None of those people in those offices that came to work that morning
Well, they were also
saw the
the
explosives.
majority of the work was done in the elevator shafts, and there was a 6-month elevator renovation of all the elevator shafts 6 months prior, which is one of the companies we're looking at.
You know, this is where it gets,
But how come nobody, none of those
Next.
None of those
Next.
people in those
Fran, I wanna have
offices
you-
Next.
saw the...
I talked to you
Next,
afterwards.
sir.
if you like. Fine.
Next, sir.
Yeah.
all right.
I've been involved with 9/11.
Young man, just a minute.
I've been involved.
Can I just let Fern go and then I'll get to you?
Yeah.
I've been involved with 9/11 since 9/11. I was told 3 times before it happened. Wally Rodriguez was the superintendent of the World Trade Center Twin Towers, and for years, until he had a child, that he was going all around the country talking about hearing explosives in the basement before the planes hit the towers. And if you really investigate 9/11, United and American Airlines, those 4 flights were still in service after 9/11. It was not about commercial airplanes, it was about missiles. And the other thing I want to say was that in 1989, it was discovered that there was asbestos in the World Trade Center towers, so they were planning on the demolition of that since 1989. 1993 World Trade Center bombings were connected to the
George?
Hey, George. I worked building number 1 for 1 year.
So did I.
You did too, okay. And I
This city.
And I wrote something that sounds exactly like what you said. That outer wall, which was made of very heavy steel, the windows were only about
Very small.
18 inches wide. They were very, very small windows. And my desk was near the wall. And when you said that they came in when they were repairing the elevators and they installed these thermite bombs along someplace on the wall.
I didn't say that.
George, why don't you say it's 9/11, it's an auspicious
I said
time?
there are things that were done at night in the elevator shafts, and we don't know the exact how the...
Okay, now stop, don't still, as we say in my Kleiner. This attack on 9/11 was not the first.
No.
There was a truck with
Right.
munitions in 1993 that went into the basement and exploded. And I worked in that building after that. The security was unbelievable. Now, you say the elevators were in 3 shifts because you had banks of elevators that took you up 1/3 of the building. Then you had another bank that took you up to the next third, and then you went all the way up to the top, okay? Now, all around the lobby, there were desks. You had to go through a lot of security to get into the building. What you're saying, young man, is that these workmen were going to repair the elevator, okay? Some of them were saboteurs. And they went into, instead of the bag of tools, they had a bag of thermite bombs. Okay? And then they went into the building and they screwed on this little template. They slid the thermite bomb in and then they set it on active.
Kroll managed...
He didn't, nothing said that in the
It was
film,
managed by
George.
Kroll.
All correct.
Marvin Bush managed Kroll. Kroll controlled the building. K-R-O-L-L controlled the building security.
All right.
They
I
know
sat
exactly
next to that
Kroll.
wall and there was no way that somebody would not spot a bomb.
He just told you.
Kroll managed the
Run
building
by
security.
Bush's brother.
Marvin Bush ran Kroll. He ran the building.
All right, now this is where it
That's
gets
fact.
crazy. Now, when we take a look at building number 7, and Dusty keeps talking about this, it came down like a perfect demolition. There's no question about it. Very, very suspicious.
So we're good.
Now, what happens is that when you create suspicion, it goes in all directions. And we have a terrible phenomenon that we have in this country and all over the world. The conspiracy theory.
Come on.
The conspiracy theory.
Come on, bro.
The official story is the original conspiracy theory.
That's a conspiracy, exactly.
The conspiracy. Okay, now Dusty,
You just said building 7 went down like a demolition. We're good, and you are correct.
no,
That's it, you said it, and it's true.
Hey, guys, I would just like to say,
Yes.
personally, I would like to thank people like George and this gentleman here who, you know, they showed up, they watched, there was another gentleman here, and he said, I was there, and I was watching him, and I could tell he shifted before he left, but it takes a lot, and it's hard to believe, and we all see the world through our own desires, and we would never do this, so it's hard to imagine other people would. But if you look throughout history, Operation Northwoods, they wanted to blow up some American things in Florida and blame it on Cuba and start a war, and Kennedy said, I'm not doing that, and that's why we don't have Kennedy anymore. And there's Operation Gladio. If you want to Google something, Google Operation Northwoods and Operation Gladio. After the war, they left people in place to foment trouble in different places. So our government, you know, there were some great quotes. We have to watch our government. It's our job. And I can only say, I take my hat off to George because I think he's if you would have seen him, oh my gosh, he was so resistant in the beginning until he saw the Building 7 47-minute challenge. He saw 7 go down, and he said, that building did not go down by fire. So it's a long process, but it's, you know.
Okay, Dusty, will you let me finish?
Yeah, I'm just making because, you know, there are a lot of people here on different learning curves,
Right.
George, so.
But can I finish?
Yes.
No,
Yep.
no, George, let the other
No.
people speak, no.
You should-
Because you're dominating a meeting and you're doing it on personal experience and emotion. Talk to the facts in the film. If you want to talk to the science in the film, I will listen. I don't want to hear the emotional response. We all know it's a very difficult thing to conceive and to understand.
I think we have a question over
Yeah, we have a
there.
question. You want to continue at the end, people want to wait.
Let the man finish.
Okay. You want to finish, or do you want to finish later?
Well, this young lady.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of confused about the architecture and the inside of the wall in an office building, where the walls like styrofoam or